So let's continue discussing what is appropriate speech on Shabbos. So we said that there's appropriate speech in the sense of not talking too much, but Tosfot brought Rashi's definition, which was not discussing business. This comes up in the Gemara and Daf Kufnun. Whoever remembers, if there's anyone who remembers, if there's anyone, it's probably Yaakov, who remembers from unit number 1. We had this Gemara. Am I allowed to tell a person, how about you come over tonight? Now, it's not just a person, it's my plumber. I'm allowed to say, my plumber, how about you come over tonight? Now, if I say come over tonight, he knows I don't mean come over and learn some Gemara. He knows I mean come fix the plumbing, right? Come, fix my fridge or whatever, right? How about you come over tonight? And we know what we mean. If you're allowed to ask a person, how about you come over tonight? Why? What's the machloket? So, what happened here? I said, how about you come over tonight? And what goes through our heads is, what goes through his head at least is, do I have time to fix his plumbing tonight? Do I have time to take care of his electrical problem tonight? So he's thinking about the electrical problems and whether he could solve them in time, solve them this evening. Is that allowed? So we say, okay, since thought is allowed, there's no problem. We say, wait, but I told him to come over. Right, I told him to come over. I never told him to do anything. I never told him to do the melacha. I didn't say work. I said, do you want to come over? The rest was completed in his mind, but that's the key. That's the key to the heter here. It's all in his head. It's in his mind. It's not something that that was said explicitly. And therefore, Rabbi Shimon Kocha says it's okay. Tanakama said it's not okay because clearly what I'm doing is I'm causing him to think about his work on Shabbat. Rabbi Shimon Kocha says the thinking is allowed, so I'm allowed to ask because then he'll think, so what? That's the machlok. Now, again, it's important to differentiate, and this has to do with things we learned in unit number 5, if I remember correctly. Unit number 5, we had a discussion of, am I allowed to tell a person to find workers to come and work, right? These things came up. So here, similarly, right, I'm allowed to say, do you have time tomorrow? I'm allowed to say, yeah, can we come over, etc. But I'm not allowed to finalize any deals and create any deals. Beseder. That was brought over here. I'll just read that specific seif in the Shulchan. Let's read these 3 seif in the Shulchan Aruch. דבר דבר שלא ידיבורך של שבת כדיבורך של חול. hilkach אסור לומר דבר פלוני יעשה למחר או סחורה פלונית תקנה למחר. So you know, to say I'll go buy this, right? You know, to mention melacha, right? To say things that are also to do on Shabbos. You're not to say on Shabbat that anything that you're not to do on Shabbat. אסור לזכור פועלים. ולא לומר לגוי לזכור לו פועלים לשבת. That was the connection to number 1 and 5, right? אף על פי שאיני ישראל צריך לאותם מלאכה לאחר השבת, שכל מה שהוא אסור לעשותו, אסור לומר לגוי לעשותו. Now here, the issue here isn't אסור לומר לגוי לעשותו on Shabbos, and you're also not allowed to say on Shabbos, do this after Shabbos, right? For those who remember from those first units, we learned there are 2 separate issues. One is the gzeira that says that you're not allowed to enjoy what the goy does. You're not allowed to have the goy do it for you. You're not allowed to enjoy it, to benefit from it. Apart from that, you're also not allowed to mention melacha, because of a davar unto itself, right? So now we're in that unto itself part. מותר לומר לחברו, הנראה בעיניך שתוכל לעמוד עמי לערב. אף על פי שמתוך כך מבין שצריך לו לערב לסוחרו, אבל לא יאמר לו, תהיה נכון עמי לערב. And now we're going to try to define how far does this go. I'm allowed to say and imply we're going to work after Shabbat, as long as it's all in our mind, as long as it's only implied. Says the Gemara, אמר רבי יהודה אמר שמואל, מותר לאדם לומר לחברו, לכרך פלוני אני הולך למחר. שאם יש בעוגנין הולך, right? If someone needs a ride, okay. So if he is mentioning the ride, okay, that's a good question. But you are allowed to mention to someone, by the way, I'm going to Ra'anana tomorrow. You say, wait, we're going to Ra'anana, it's outside the Tchum. Theoretically, you could connect the tchumim, and then it's not a problem, right? You're allowed, theoretically, you could connect the tchumim, and therefore, since there is a way to do it that would be mutar, I'm allowed to say it on Shabbat, but note that it says ani holech, not ani nosea, right? Not ani ruchev. How are you getting there? Are you getting 60 kilometers away? Obviously, you're going to take a horse, right? Beseder, but I didn't say that I'm taking the horse, which is also on Shabbos at that point, right? This is nifsak. There are a few interesting nafkaminot from this. A few interesting nice kulot.
Is it only about melachot deoraita, or would it also be drabanans? Because if you could, I don't think that there's necessarily going to be a melachat deoraita in riding an animal. I mean, there could be, but
no, also drabanan, from what I recall.
Yeah.
I'll tell you how I know, because business is also asher midrabanan. We're going to see that in the next unit. Also, buying and selling, right? Buying and selling is also drabanan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, it's more complicated than what I said just now. Is buying and selling only drabanan? It's a bit more complicated, but the pashtut is that it's drabanan. So,
or is it the essence of Shabbat?
For those who were at the
Rav Betzalel, yeah. It was Rav Blumentzweig, or it was you? I don't remember at the Siyum thing.
At the Siyum was Rav Blumentzweig. Yeah. Rav Blumentzweig. Wow. Never been so flat.
I don't remember anything that you say, but Rav Blumentzweig.
Yeah, I'm flattered that you might confuse us. That's quite a thing. Say, did Rav Blumentzweig say Rav Betzalel? Yefeh. Wow, that's the biggest compliment I got this year. It was almost as good as when the Wi-Fi went off and you all just waited for me to come back 5 minutes after the Shiur was supposed to end. That was very impressive. That was my second biggest compliment this year. So Shulchan Aruch says, יכול לומר לחברו, לקרח פלוני אני הולך למחר, וכן מותר לומר לו, לך עמי לקרח פלוני למחר. Right? Come with me to Ra'anana tomorrow. Right? Now, come with me. Come in the car. How can you come with me? בסדר, but כיוון שהיום יכול ללך על ידי בורגנין, וכן כל כיוצא בזה שיש בו צד היתר לעשותו היום, יכול לומר לחברו שיעשני למחר, ולבד שלא יזכיר לו שכירות. Right? Obviously, you can't say, come, it'll cost you 200 shekels, right? Right? If it's a taxi, right? Anything that there is a way to do in a mutar way today, you're allowed to say that you're going to do tomorrow, even though obviously we're going to do it in a way that's asur, right? Says the Mishnah Berurah, after b'Shabbat asur lelech mechutz hatchum, kol makom mutar lomar lekrach ploni ani holech lemachar, כיוון דעל עצם הליכה אין איסור, אלא שמחוסר בו גנים, technicality. מי אסור לומר אני רוכב למחר או הולך בקרון, כיוון דדיבורו הוא דבר האסור בעצם ואין מועיל עצה לזה. רק יאמר אני הולך. Right? You say I'm going, right? You can't say I'm driving, right? I don't know if the word commuting necessarily refers to that, but I think the idea is clear. Says the Yekut Yosef, same idea, מותר לומר בשבת הלך מחר למקום פלוני, וגם אם כוונתו לנסוע שם במכונית, מאחר ולא מוציא בשפתיו עניין נסיעה, רק מהרהר בה, אין בזה איסור של דיבור חול בשבת, מותר לומר כן אפילו נוסע לעיר אחרת, ועד שיאמר בלשון הליכה. Now,
are you allowed to talk about those things in a more general way? These examples are all about like tomorrow, let's do melacha. Right. But if you wanted to talk about the good old days when you could fly places, or I've always wanted to take a road trip to whatever. I'm not talking about something concrete. Just it's like an idea that involves melacha.
All the examples here seem to imply a specific plan, right? I think, as I'm pretty sure the idea here isn't, I think you say, I want to go on a cruise. So if the Aruch HaShulchan says you're allowed to say that you will go on a cruise too, or right, you're allowed to actually be more explicit about it, because as we learned in Unit 12, right, you can also go, there are ways of being on the cruise on Shabbat. Instead of saying maybe it depends on whether you're enjoying it. But yeah, so if you're talking about how you built something, you're talking about the work you've done, you're talking about, right? You tell a story about the business world, that you've done, right? Something you've done in the business or whatever, right? It seems that those should all be okay. The problem seems to only be planning for the future, right? Again, first of all, we see for all the poskim are discussing those examples. And second, I think when you go into the context here has always been this pasuk of the doesn't come out. It's not these words that come out of nowhere. It's the middle of this pasuk where the pasuk seems to refer to a certain mindset on Shabbat, not planning for other things. If we look at all the other examples we've seen throughout the page, right? It's always been, right, worrying about work that you'll have to do. So being there and then, as we said, right? Not working with your head or not planning the next work. I think the general idea here, so Zev is correct, I think, right? If it upsets you to discuss these things, that's a different issue. But that's not Yaakov's question, obviously, right? Yaakov's question is, can I talk about a business deal we had, business that I did with someone? Can I talk about, right? Can I talk about these things not as a plan? It seems that the context is Shabbos should not be a day of work and also not a day of planning work and not a day of, but just the very mentioning, the very discussing unto itself seems to be okay. I think I don't see any examples here that go otherwise. Remind me to have another look to make sure, maybe I missed something, but definitely from all the examples I see here.
It seems like some of the examples still are like getting hung up on almost like, right, the fact that you use the lashon of melacha is the problem. So when it, right?
So, there are two ways of looking at it.
Because otherwise, Haniresh Tamoriti Imila Erev is, right, maybe is just as much like planning melacha as the other one. Like, it seems like it's almost about just the fact that you use the lashon of melacha that is the problem, in which case it could be that also these cases would be.
Right, so there are two ways of looking at it, I think. One way of looking at it is the Isur is mentioning melacha, period. Then you mention melacha, you're good. And that would be a chumrah as well, right? You're not allowed to mention melacha in other contexts either. But if you understand Rabbi Yosef Korcha differently, where the idea is you're not allowed to plan melacha with speech. Now, in this case, I didn't plan melacha with speech. I just connected with your mind, right? What's it called? What's it called?
Telepathy?
Yes, I telepathically, thank you. I telepathically, right? Well done. I telepathically let you understand what word I was looking for. And then you telepathically understand what I'm referring to, right? That's okay. Now, I can also give you hints, like I'm going to Ra'anana. And what I mean is, I'll be driving so you can get a ride with me, right? That's right. In other words, that's I think there are two ways of reading Rabbi Yosef ben Korcha in that sense, right? You can read him as the Isur is mentioning melacha. As long as you don't mention melacha, you're good, and you don't care about anything else. Another way of looking at it is you're not allowed to plan melacha explicitly through speech, but you are allowed to say things that are not the melacha, and if people understand that you're referring to melacha, that's okay, right? Nafkamina would be, could you just discuss melacha that's not, right? It's not a plan. So that's a fair point. Let me have another look after, but I didn't really see examples of that, of just telling the story of what I did in business this week, Just two final, two important kulot. When there are Chot Shabbat, the less interesting one. It's interesting. It's the Gershaz is the most fun one here. אפשר במדינה שמצויים באוטובוסים ורכבות שרוב הנוסעים בהם נוחרים ונדים מותר לנסוע בהם, right? You get them on everyone, right? For some reason, I remember this from Switzerland. I'm sure this happened in many places, but that's where I happen to remember this. Also in London, there's such a thing that many people have a monthly pass and you can just jump on the bus. Now, so you can also jump on the bus on Shabbos because he's not driving for you. He's driving because he's doing the route. issues about whether he takes every stop and whether he stops for you, etc. But discounting that, there are ways that it would be halachically permissible to ride the tubes, to ride the buses on Shabbat, and therefore since there is a way to ride them on Shabbat, you can also say that you'll be riding the following day, right? Once again, as long as there's a mutter way of doing it on Shabbos, you're also allowed to hint at it to hint that you'll be doing the Asr way during the week. And this Gershaz I really love. You're allowed to say now. The Gershaz earlier says that it has to be practical. If it has to be practical, you really could get to the other place. If I say I'm going to Ra'anana, you can't get to Ra'anana in one day. It's crazy to get at least from Efrat to Ra'anana in one day. Walking, it's crazy. But it's allowed. Why? And you're allowed to ride a bike on Shabbos, obviously. Right? If we mentioned what's Shabbosdik, just that's in the specific unit of what is Shabbosdik, what is not. Where Shlomo Zalman says, of course you can ride a bike, right? Now, technically you can't ride your bike to Ra'anana because it's outside the Tchum. That's as I say, chutzmai. That's irrelevant to the current issue because you can solve that with burganin. But you are allowed to ride the bike on Shabbos to other places. That's right. This is a bit of a side point in the Gershaz, but still a fun point. But the bottom line is, right, you're allowed to two ways of reading. I'll just sum up this point. Two ways of reading a Rishiv and Korcha. One way is to say that you're not allowed to plan with speech on Shabbat, but you're allowed to say things that are implied on Shabbat, because that would be what's in your head. You're telepathically passing the information from one person to the other, making a plan. The other way is to say that you're not allowed to mention melacha, period. That's it. Now, is riding a melacha? Not necessarily, because you can take a bike. This later.